Hi, in this session we will talk about the content and how it works for retailers and brands. So first let me introduce myself really quick. So my name is Sergey Shvets and I'm a founder and director of technology at Icekit. I'm also founder and CEO at Gepard.io, and that gives me around 20 plus years of experience in content business, and I've started from the technology and now more into management. So before we go further, let's first talk about what actually the product content is. And people tend to call product content all sort of information that gives to buyers the understanding of what exactly they are buying. That includes the basic information, like product categorization, product name and titles, logistical information, which helps retailers to store the goods and to transport them, marketing texts, which are used to deliver messages from marketeers to buyers, product features, which highlights some extraordinary specific or key selling points about the products. Somebody also calls them reasons to buy. That also includes technical specifications, which helps buyers to understand how product will perform. Uh, Videos and other assets like PDF sheets, leaflets, manuals, and the relations and configurations of product. So how it relates to other products, how it can be configured with other products. Uh, Also rich content, which is also called as A plus content. That term was introduced by Amazon, and that's a sort of a mix of textual information and good-looking photos of the product. And the last item is the reviews. So that's the buyer opinion about the product. So their or expert opinion, and that also helps people to orientate themselves in the buying process. So as you can see, all this information is very diverse. So how do we actually structurize it and make a proper storage of it? And here comes the taxonomy. So taxonomy is a science, and it's a science of categorizing and structuring the content on the products. And it's a sort of a way to define the product content schema and to define how exactly the content should be structured, how it should be presented. And it creates a sort of a pattern or a space where content could be placed, and that makes it measurable and possible to validate. In our company, we've been doing a lot of studies, a lot of interviews with stakeholders from retailers and brands. And things we're asking, like, okay, guys, which key challenges do you have in the content journey? And the biggest challenge for organization nowadays is the data quality. And data quality is everything about making the good content with a good coverage, with a high completeness, with high accuracy. So that's like a challenge number one across all organizations we've been interviewing. The challenge number two is making a single source of the truth inside of organization. So nowadays the data are that much dispersed that they can be stored in all pieces around organization, and different departments may own a different piece of information, and it's quite complicated for organizations to make a single source of truth. The next challenge is how people actually exchange the content and syndicate it to their partners. So that's problem number three, and that's all about how exactly you deliver your content to your data consumers. And then the last challenge is all sort of company-specific challenges, which we will not focus right now. We will focus on more general things. So, the content quality, how do we actually manage it? And the biggest, the most important qualities of the content is the completeness, accuracy, and granularity. The granularity term we will explain a little bit further. So let's talk about the completeness. And completeness means specifically how do you explain and how do you describe the product in a most complete way. And what you could do about this is to define the validation rules, which would require a person entering the data to provide it to the full extent. And you do define such validations with the help of taxonomy. The workflows will help you to bring the data accuracy on the better level. For example, one could think of making a step of quality assurance after data entry before data are actually going out. And so that's a way of managing the data quality of accuracy using the workflows. And then the last term is the granularity. And that exactly means how granular, so how your data are being split into tiny pieces which you can manipulate. And that has been managed using taxonomy. So specifically, your taxonomy have to define how granular your data have to be. Here comes an example. So you can see an example of a highly granular data set of product specs on input and output ports. So in this example, you see 3 specs are representing each type of port separately. And the same type of data could be also represented by just one textual string. And semantically, that will mean exactly the same as the statement above. But the ability to process and to transform this information will be much lower. So you can also see in example number 2, the battery HP long life 4 cells, 53 watt hour lithium. So that gives a lot of information about which battery is. But if you really want to look into the data in a granular way, then you're gonna make 4 specs out of this one string. And please mind also a tiny detail. The 53 watt hours actually have to be separated from the measuring units. So that's super important. So you could easily transform your numeric data into different system, which can vary, for example, from country to country. Now let's look at granularity for marketing text. In this example, you can see product features. And product feature is being formed by a product feature image, a feature title, and a feature description. And these elements are defined as a requirement. But how do we deliver the data? And that's been a challenge for a lot of companies. Still, the most used medium to deliver data is the Excel templates. Everybody just making use of them. Also, they are not perfect and it's very difficult to put rich data into Excel templates. Still, companies are making use of it. Then it goes to brand portals, when brands creating content portals, which export data to retailers in a sort of way through templates or through HTML or JSON XML formats. Then it comes about the API. So brands or retailers provide the APIs to connect and to exchange the data. And the last channel mentioned is the content service providers. So these are the organizations who aggregate data from different brands and share them with retailers. So here comes the dilemma, because when you have two parties, there is always a different view on the subject. So what do we actually have as an expectations from brand side and retailer side? For brands, it's super important that there is a consistency in everything. The content itself have to be the same quality, on the same level, with a good governance across all products. The delivery have to be consistent across all channels, and there should be minimum of manual work. So brands don't want to spend time adapting the content for retailer requirements or for whatsoever. They just want to push it in the same way, and everybody has to use it. And the retailer side, there is quite different expectations. So the content has been expected to be adapted to retailer needs. And that's again the high coverage and appealing content itself, but then again, it has to be presented in the way as retailer wanted. The intake of the brand's content have to be effortless, and there are the requirements how the content should be delivered and what exactly have to be put into the content delivery. And what retailer actually wants to do themselves is to bring a personal marketing touch on the content, so it feels like it's owned by retailer. And when it comes to content delivery, as mentioned before, we're still seeing a lot of brands are still using Excel as the key way or the key medium to transfer the product information to retailers. And retailer have to type in those data or import them semi-automatically. That is also not been a perfect way to process the data because it brings a lot of errors and mistakes with the manual input, and it's like a the most boring job in the world, just to type in the data, and when people want to be more creative on the content and everything. So how do we actually sort it out? How do we bring this all together? So point number one is that data granularity, it is actually key to have your content well managed. So for brands and retailers, both important to maintain the data granularity on the high level. So your content consumers, like your end buyers or any sort of internal stakeholders, are happy with the data you're providing them. And these data are processable. So how do we do that? We bring marketing into the taxonomy development. So we listen carefully to consumers' expectations. We draw requirements to the content based on the consumer expectations, and we develop the content according to these expectations and requirements. And that puts the taxonomy and content development into focus for how consumers are expecting the content. So the role of taxonomy manager, and that's point number 3, is super important because that will define how good your data will be. So what do we have to say for brands? You just need the right software, which is flexible to support taxonomy requirements of yours and your partners whom you want to deliver the content. To help you to develop and support the content, have your content flow defined. So typically that could be something from R&D with specs going to marketing, and marketing makes some textual information and defines some guidelines for creatives and visuals, and then it goes to quality assurance. Please be prepared to prepare the unique content for retailers, because it's important for them and they are your customers. Focus on automating the data delivery and data intake. So whenever you have data deliver, try to automate this process, because that will help both parties and will save a lot of time for you. And support your partners with their content requirements, because these are being defined not only by your partners themselves, but also by their customers. And that's the way customers are been expecting the content to be delivered, the content to meet their recognition patterns. So that's super important. And the last thing, measure your content performance. So if you make a simple benchmark on the turnover with a good with product who has like a good content and the bad product content, you will notice a difference. So about retailers, it's very important that you automate data imports, and then it enables you to focus on creative work instead. Next thing for retailers is super important to define the right content flow and define the content lifecycle. So you could easily embed some content enrichments inside of your content flow. Research on your customers' cognition. So you really need to understand how they are thinking and how they are searching for products. That will help you to define the taxonomy requirements, which you further will explain to your brands. So brands could really satisfy your content expectations. Be prepared to work with multiple content sources, because there can be a lot of content laying around you, and if your software is not capable of making the benefit of using multiple content sources, it will be no use for you. And centralize your taxonomy management. So you have the properly educated person defining your taxonomy and defining your data granularity. And the last thing is, let's talk about the key trends, right? So what do we have the content right now? That rich content pages are actually booming. So people are more appealed by nice looking product landing pages than just very boring page with the specs. So specs are still very important, but they are more used in navigation and in search. And when you have a consumer or a customer coming to the product page, there you have to really present them an appealing content, convincing content. The PIM implementation, that's still a lot of troubles for all sort of organizations, and people still fighting with that, and that's going to be like the biggest relief organization could do for them. And the last trend is the automation of the product content delivery.